Max lay in bed, restless over how things had gone wrong between him and Ethan. He no longer indulged the boy as he once had, though he still abided by their agreement. Ethan had tried making peace, but Max felt no desire to reconcile. Unlike his naive brother Edward, Max had his limits. After days of Max avoiding him, Ethan confronted the man, grabbing and threatening to restrain him for 3 days and nights if he continued to spurn Ethan's advances. Ethan warned Max not to provoke him. Pleading for another chance, Ethan promised to be gentle if Max would reciprocate his feelings. But Max now regretted ever caring for the boy, seeing Ethan's controlling nature. As Max berated him, Ethan sadly acknowledged no cure existed for regret. Despite Max's outrage, Ethan steeled himself to follow through with long-held plans to bind them closer, hoping Max would warm to him again. Their strained relationship continues on this complex trajectory, testing the boundaries of trust and power between the two. It seems Ethan was still unsatisfied, forcibly restraining Max despite his protests. Ethan threatened to confine Max to the bed forever if he did not acquiesce, preferring death to an eternity trapped as Ethan's prisoner. In an attempt to break Max's resolve, Ethan acted increasingly aggressive, forcing unwanted intimacy. This caused Max great distress, fearing permanent damage to their relationship. Ethan callously proposed Max end things by violence, giving him a chance at freedom through mutually assured destruction. Max steadfastly refused, provoking Ethan's rage at the rejection. Their toxic dynamic spiraled downwards, with Ethan trying to manipulate Max's sense of obligation to family as leverage. Max could only helplessly endure, weakened by substances that left him adrift for days in Ethan's tempestuous tides. Just then, Max's brother Edward called, unintentionally revealing news that cut Max deeply. Though difficult, the call gave Max needed respite and clarity, strengthening his resolve to break free of Ethan's control. The unhealthy relationship seems to have reached its limit, with Max realizing Ethan will always prioritize his own desires over Max's agency and well-being. When Ethan returned home, he saw Max going to take a shower and wanted to join him. Max didn't firmly refuse, instead asking about Ethan going to see a matchmaking date, knowing that Edward had already mentioned it. Ethan seemed a little reproachful, thinking Max was jealous. He picked Max up, reassuring him that it wasn't Ethan's wish but his grandmother's arrangement. He was afraid Max would misunderstand, which is why he didn't let Edward talk about it. Max wondered why Ethan had brought him up in front of Edward, worried that he might become suspicious. Ethan resented not being able to let the whole world know about their relationship. But if Edward didn't care to mention it, it meant he truly didn't care. Ethan was always like this, not telling Max anything yet still fixated on him. His love seemed more like possessive control using underhanded means. Max could no longer stay by his side. He promptly made plans to take his younger brother Edward and their father away. That way Ethan would no longer be able to threaten him. After discussing it with his father and confirming Edward's thoughts, Max finally chose a day to leave. Although Ethan knew everything, he was too confident that Max could not escape. In the end, their relationship developed beyond Ethan's guesses. Returning home, Ethan did not see Max anywhere. He had really disappeared. Finding out Edward had returned to their home country, Ethan hurriedly went looking for Max. But Max completely refused to see Ethan. Seeing this, Ethan directly climbed the wall to get in. Edward started becoming worried, but Ethan had already reached the door and even threatened to break into their house. Edward could not stand it anymore and rushed out to interrogate Ethan on how he dared to break into the general's home, saying that was against the law. He was shocked that in just 3 months, Ethan had become so gone. Ethan persistently asked where Max was, saying no matter what he would not tell since he knew Ethan had wronged Max. As long as Ethan laid a hand on Edward, Max would never forgive him for the rest of his life. Realizing what Edward said meant Max was fine, Edward added that Ethan was good-looking and rich. If he wanted someone to fool around with, he should not look for Max and should let him go instead. Ethan insisted on not letting Max go. Edward strongly challenged him to find Max himself. In the last 3 months, Ethan had searched through 18 different planets already but could not find him. No matter how much Edward said, he could not say, and Ethan only knew to kneel down and beg. At this time, Edward thought Ethan had gone crazy. Someone who was arrogant and unruly from a young age, who had never known what it meant to bow their head, was now kneeling and begging him, all for the sake of Max. Even though Ethan looked sincerely pleading, Edward could not betray his older brother. As soon as Edward saw Lucas come home, he hurried to hide behind him. Lucas spoke up, saying that Ethan should not have come here, as he had given up halfway on searching for the 6th path. Ethan thought Lucas was not only not telling him Max's address but also deliberately going to many planets to confuse his vision. In reality, that was because Max had asked Lucas to do that. Ethan refused to stand up until he knew Max's address. He could not lose him again. Lucas told Edward to ask his brother if he was willing to meet Ethan, then tell Ethan. If Max did not want to meet, Ethan had to find him himself and not bother Edward anymore. On Max's side, he was discussing construction plans with his subordinates. Their mountain resort needed professional architects, which Max could arrange. They needed to speed things up and complete constructions to retain tourists. As for capital investment, they just needed to attract investors. Max would make a draft proposal to send to some major investors for review first. After finishing work, Max went to an area with a strong signal to contact Edward. He was somewhat happy to see Edward's blissful life. Max was stunned to see Ethan kneeling just to know his whereabouts. Right then, his younger brother Edward called to recount what happened earlier and asked Max's opinion on meeting Ethan. If Max did not want to meet, Edward would tell Ethan outright to crush his hopes. Though a bit naive, Edward understood his brother's hesitation. In the end, Max still did not want to see Ethan again. 5 days later, work was progressing. Investor Andy, a representative from Sunny Hotel, was known to be interested in and valued Max's project. Sunny's owner really had very high autonomy. It was just unclear whether this time it was Andy's own decision or because Ethan had successfully found his way here after all. Mr. Andy generously invested on behalf of his company in everything Max's company still lacked. With that attitude, whether related to Ethan or not, Max could not refuse. His subordinates happily agreed to start construction right away. 2 days after signing, the investment funds also smoothly arrived. Not only that, Andy also helped them negotiate even better terms. Max had wanted to silently watch and see what method Ethan would use to humiliate him. But unexpectedly, Ethan still did not appear. A staff member walking alongside asked what was on his mind. Max said he was just thinking it was about time to start matters with the Ice City tribe and should make a trip to the Mahjong tribe tomorrow. He instructed the staff to be vigilant with the locals there and quickly return if anything seemed off. At Sunny Hotel, Ethan reviewed the transportation of materials to Max's company. Psychologist Dr. Kira told him to be patient, but he was growing impatient after waiting so long. If not for him keeping control over all of Max's closest confidants, he could not have found Max. 1 month ago, Dokai had come to help Ethan locate Max's hiding place. He had searched for and followed Max for so long, yet still had to listen to Dr. Kira's advice to not reveal himself but silently assist Max instead. The 5 months of searching and waiting, unable to meet, was driving Ethan mad. He hated not being able to directly see Max, hold him tight, and keep him by his side forever. But doing so would not win Max's sincere heart. He could only wait until Max softened, though it seemed Max did not care even when Ethan kneeled before him. Dr. Kira said Ethan's failure was not understanding Max's nature, thus always using the wrong approach. Max was inherently soft-hearted, otherwise how could he have cared for Ethan before? Ethan had crossed Max's boundaries, so kneeling meant nothing. As long as Max accepted Ethan's apology, Ethan could stab himself a dozen times and it would be fine as long as he stayed alive to be with Max for the rest of their lives. A few days later, a chance arrived. Max's subordinates had gone missing after negotiations. He went to gather a few more people to search for them. Right then, investor Andy appeared and said he would lend Max the fastest spacecraft and appropriate crew with the condition that his boss Ethan could come along too. Though Max knew this would happen eventually, he did not expect it to be right now. Max did not expect that in the end, he still could not escape from Ethan. The planet leader thanked them for their help. Ethan said they would continue collaborating in the future and hoped the leader could help him more. Max felt Ethan had changed somewhat. He did not ridicule, restrain, threaten, or humiliate Max like before. The leader worried that the Sil tribe people were very hostile to outsiders and it would be dangerous for the two of them to go there. Ethan said not to worry, he had made preparations and would definitely bring Mr. Ma Lu back safely, of course without using force. The two boarded the spacecraft and Max thought Ethan wanted to trick him onto it and take him back. Ethan did have that intention but held back. Max knew this yet still dared to get on. What other choice did he have when this planet only had Ethan's ship? Ethan leaned over to buckle Max's seatbelt. Ethan suggested if Max wanted to attract tourists, he needed something unique and should renovate the residences. Since they were discussing business, Max engaged and asked what kind of renovations. Ethan explained that the planet's colors were too monotonous and people living in this environment always felt a lack of stimulation. If the roofs or walls were painted fresh, bright colors, it would be much more pleasing to the eye. Max felt this made sense. With just the two of them there, the demon inside Ethan awoke again. Just seeing and hearing Max made Ethan's body heat up. He calmed himself and continued discussing building a ski slope with Max. Ethan offered to invest since he was planning to build a movie theater and move other businesses over too. He was unafraid of losses. Max tilted his head to rest, thinking only a fool wouldn't know Ethan's motives. If Ethan acted as he used to, perhaps Max's heart could have remained firmer. But now Ethan was completely different from before. He seemed to be using another method to capture Max, just disguising himself for now. When they arrived, Ethan woke Max up. Max realized Ethan's arm had been a pillow for him to lean on. Ethan handed Max binoculars, their hands touching and making Ethan smile broadly. Below was the long-haired horse protection area, the guardian deity of the Sil tribe. Ethan gave Max a gun for protection, but Max declined, worried it would be misunderstood. Stepping off the spacecraft, Ethan stopped Max because there were 5 people ahead pointing guns at them. It seems they have been deemed enemies now. Lucas must have committed some offense. Max walked forward with his hands raised, saying, "Hello, I'm very sorry to bother you. Let me explain, we are not enemies. Could everyone please put down your weapons first?" The leader signaled for the weapons to be lowered, then had Max escorted away. Ethan panicked and grabbed one of the men's collars, raising a fist, but thanks to Max he stopped. The two of them were taken away by the group. It's likely neither side understands the other's language, though Lucas had said there were no language barriers when looking at their sculptures. Max's eyes widened in amazement as he complimented their work. Even in this situation, he was still thinking about the job. Suddenly, the dignified chief approached. Ahead of him was the long-haired horse rescuer with an injured front leg, blood flowing steadily from its mouth. It had likely been hit by a snowmobile. If the Sil tribe's lucky symbol died, Lucas would face severe punishment. Ethan raised his hand, saying he had medicine that could save the horse. One underling objected, believing them to be Respua's accomplices, but the chief agreed it was better than watching Respua die. Ethan made a deal. Before getting the medicine, they had to release Max. They freed Max and Ethan told him to wait for his return. Half an hour later, Ethan came back with a first aid kit. Max worried if he failed, Ethan would become the perpetrator who hastened its death. At that point, they wouldn't easily forgive him. Ethan was happy Max was worrying for him, and he hugged Max to reassure him. The medicine Ethan brought was the most advanced in the cosmic spheres. Even critically injured people could be saved, let alone a horse. Max watched Ethan's back. Although he was determined to keep his distance, he knew there were feelings between them. Max intensely craved love, something he could only feel from Ethan. It was just that Ethan touched his boundaries, so he couldn't accept Ethan's love. Ethan injected the horse rescuer with a syringe and bandaged its broken leg. They would have to wait 3 days to see if the tribe would let Ethan stay. At this time, Lucas was inside the jail cell. He was surprised to see Max and Ethan being escorted in. Lucas quickly grabbed Max's hand and happily asked why he was here. Seeing them holding hands, Ethan's jealousy flared up. As he pulled Max's hand back, Ethan said of course they came to find Lucas. Only now did Lucas realize Ethan was the owner of the Sunny Hotel. Lucas explained he had a very difficult journey back. He just dozed off for a bit with the snowmobile's speed set to the lowest level, but the long-haired horses here aren't afraid of humans. They're more curious about people, so this one didn't know to avoid the snowmobile. That's how it got hit. Lucas wished Max had come with him earlier, otherwise now he wouldn't have to fear being locked up here for life, even though he didn't intentionally hit Respua. Max said not to worry, Ethan was trying his best to heal it. If they can make it through today, there will be hope. Over the past few days, Lucas slept on a large haystack since there was no signal here to contact Max. Lucas said their craftsmanship was outstanding. If applied to the Ice City, it could probably attract tourists. The two chatted animatedly while Ethan sat to the side with a headache. That evening, a subordinate brought food to them. Max asked about the horse's condition but received no answer. Ethan put his arm around Max, saying that if dinner was brought, then it means the horse must still be alive. Tonight's meal was potatoes, a staple crop of the West Ear tribe, and geothermal spheres. Ethan tried a spoonful and immediately spit it out since it was barely edible. Max fed him, saying he knew Ethan was spoiled since childhood but now had no right to be picky. He coaxed Ethan to eat a little bit to line his stomach. Ethan blushed and obediently opened his mouth to eat Max's feeding. Max even praised him for being good. Clearly Max had feelings for Ethan. Ethan was like an excited puppy wagging his tail, waiting for every spoonful from his owner. When dividing up sleeping spots, Lucas took the left side, Max slept in the middle, Ethan on the right. Since Max was afraid of the cold, sleeping close together would provide more warmth. But Ethan refused, demanding to sleep in the middle, pretending he extremely feared the cold and didn't like sleeping too close to others or he wouldn't be able to sleep. Max hugged Ethan and whispered wasn't he the one who disliked being close to people? Ethan replied that exclusion didn't include Max. Ethan still revealed his gangster-like nature from before. He turned Max's face towards him and fiercely kissed those lips. Ethan said he missed Max. Had he acted enough? Ethan was confused. Max replied he didn't want to play lovers with Ethan anymore. Ethan had crossed his boundaries. Max pushed Ethan away, afraid Lucas would find out. Ethan lay on top of Max, hugging him tightly despite his struggling. Ethan said he really missed Max. When he heard Max was in a vehicle accident, he was very worried. In their relationship, Ethan was always the one enthusiastically taking the lead, seeming to have the upper hand, but really Ethan was at the disadvantage. He truly liked Max. His previous methods were wrong and he would change, hoping Max would trust him one more time. Max leaving Ethan was like a bird escaping its cage, but Ethan leaving Max was like a fish leaving water. He couldn't survive. Ethan didn't even have the courage to hear the answer from Max's mouth. The two hugged and slept the whole night. In the morning, Lucas woke up and saw them embracing. He blamed himself for not thinking of that method to get warmer. A subordinate loudly opened the door, waking Max up. Respua had revived and needed continued treatment. Everyone was overjoyed and incredulous. The foal's condition had greatly improved, which was worthy of celebration for the whole Sil tribe. Their attitude towards Ethan also changed tremendously. That day their lodging was changed to 2 bedrooms with fireplaces. Smelling the fire, Ethan wrinkled his nose in disgust. Max said if he didn't like the smell, he could sleep on the spacecraft. Ethan then coquettishly said no, I don't hate it. After the foal fully recovers, they can discuss hiring terms, so Ethan was considered to have rendered merit already. Ethan brightly asked Max for a reward. As long as Max indulged and sweet-talked him, kissing him once, Ethan would be delighted. In the past, Ethan had demanded more and more unreasonably and Max had acquiesced countless times already. One more time wouldn't make a difference, but somehow Max didn't want to do that now. Ethan tightly grasped Max's hand, so Max only wanted to avoid him as much as possible. Their 1-year contract had ended and Max had already spent a year with Ethan, clearing their debts. But the wounds on Max's body and Ethan's verbal abuse were not so easily forgiven or forgotten just by kneeling or apologizing. Max thought, take off the masks, there's no need to disguise things, whether it's humiliation or violence, it's still better than pretending. He was afraid that if he looked too much he would soften. Ethan self-mocked that Max had seen through his endurance. After finding Max, it took tremendous willpower for Ethan to refrain from immediately taking Max away and excitedly wanting to permanently lock Max by his side. Max retreated. Ethan could only endure because he knew Max wanted his heart, not just his body. Ethan fundamentally couldn't leave Max. If Max wanted to act just now, Ethan would have continued, absolutely not touching Max. Ethan pushed Max onto the bed.